Hey, everybody, welcome to a vice presidential debate breakdown recap. The third and final stream of the evening, everybody. But if you're watching back and you didn't watch the debate, that's fine. It should still be live on our show, on our channel, youtube.com/FrannyFio. But this is also for the podcast listeners. What up, my good people? I wonder if you watched the debate. Did you? How did you find it? How are we? I thought it was like a little boring or whatever. No, I truly felt like a lot of it was just blanket, pretty policy heavy. You can tell these two people know a lot of what they're talking about. I didn't think there was a lot of daylight. In fact, there is not a lot of daylight between the two of them when it comes to foreign policy, climate change, or immigration. And that was sad. And that was on full display here. The biggest differences and the biggest moments, I think, were when Tim Walz was able to talk about abortion and JD Vance was basically like, he's right. He's right. Like, he didn't say he's right. We'll get to the specifics of what he said. But JD Vance kind of had this interesting admission, and I want to look at that a little bit later because it was a very interesting debate tactic. But the overall thing was, we started out with talking about, and I'm not even going to play these because it's too depressing. We're talking about Iran, talking about Israel, and Tim Walz echoed exactly what Kamala Harris has said. It was the same old, and then JD Vance did the same, and they were both like, "Not, my guy is better. My guy likes Israel more. My guy's strong," and the other guy's like, "No, your guy not strong. My guy's strong." And here's the thing: if this were actually an issue that was honestly debated between these two parties, and Donald Trump is such an Israel sycophant that he's received so much money from Miriam Adelson, et cetera, that he would never do this. But there is an opening here to say, it's been a year. Your guy hasn't gotten a ceasefire done. Your guy is kind of weak. Now there's an expansion of this war. JD Vance didn't take that tack. JD Vance didn't go that direction. It was merely, platitudes, and nobody really wants to talk about the Middle East. Same thing with climate change. In the middle of the Hurricane Helene's destruction, JD Vance and Tim Walz and the parties that they represent largely are similar. My favorite part, and I don't know if we have this though, my favorite part was JD Vance said, let's just hypothetically say that carbon is real, that carbon is actually contributing to global warming. Hypothetically, even in that case, the Democrats are wrong. Like, this was just so good. I want to play this really quick for y'all because I thought it was just a weird moment from JD Vance. And I don't know if it's going to make too many headlines, but it's weird.
Climate change. And Nora, you asked about climate change. I think this is a very important issue. Look, a lot of people are justifiably worried about all these crazy weather patterns. I think it's important for us, first of all, to say Donald Trump and I support clean air, clean water. We want the environment to be cleaner and safer. But one of the things that I've noticed some of our Democratic friends talking a lot about is a concern about carbon emissions, this idea that carbon emissions drives all of the climate change. Well, let's just say that's true, just for the sake of argument, so we're not arguing about weird science. Let's just say that.
Let's just say that's true. Like, even if I were to concede that point, like, which I'm not, but like, I'm going to because I secretly do know it's real and it's playing out, and a lot of people aren't even watching this because the power hasn't been restored to their homes in North Carolina and Florida and Georgia and states I kind of need to win. But anyway, let's just imagine that this bunk science, which is real science, but whatever, everyone has their opinion on science.
That's true. Well, if you believe that, what would you want to do? The answer is that you'd want to reshore as much American manufacturing as possible, and you'd want to produce as much energy as possible in the United States of America because we're the cleanest economy in the entire world. What have Kamala Harris's policies actually led to? More energy production in China, more manufacturing overseas, more doing business in some of the dirtiest parts of the entire world. And when I say that, I mean the amount of carbon emissions they're doing per unit of economic output. So if we actually care about getting cleaner air and cleaner water, the best thing to do is to double down and invest in American workers and the American people. And
almost like you need like a, an Inflation Reduction Act. You need like a, an unprecedented investment into solar energy, wind energy, using with good paying union jobs. You need to bring he's like at many points, and this was the first point, but at many points in this debate, JD Vance makes an argument for Kamala Harris's policies and Joe Biden's legacies, like the good parts, the non-genocidal parts. We need to understand that's what he does at multiple points throughout this debate, is basically make a case for Democratic policies. So there he is, again, talking himself out of a job, which I found JD Vance to be doing quite a lot in this entire debate, is talking himself out of a job. It was really weird. But let me go to let's leave the stuff that they agreed on, because the only thing I'm going to say on the stuff that they agreed on, and I mean just the lack of daylight in between the two of them, is that for the first time, I think I heard Tim Walz and really at any candidate on a national level humanize immigrants, and basically call out this strategy of demonizing immigrants. And I really appreciated that from Tim Walz. And I'm going to see if I can call it up here. So he's talking about actually fixing, the problems at the border or whatnot, the broken immigration system, problems at the border. Look at me, I'm a Republican. I'm a CNN anchor. This was a good answer, because for the first time, I heard a candidate actually try to push back on the dogs and cats narrative. Here's my problem. Talk about the dogs and the cats. Why? Why would you not talk about it? The whole debate, you guys, no mention of dogs, no mention of cats, no real mention of how JD Vance stoked this falsehood. A little bit, and we'll get into where there was an opportunity, and he basically kind of he tried to. We'll see his response, but here's what I liked from Tim Walz.
We fix this issue with a bill that is necessary, but the issue on this is what happens when you don't want to solve it. You demonize it. And we saw this, and Senator Vance, and it surprises me on this, talking about and saying, I will create stories to bring attention to this. That vilified a large number of people who were here legally in the community of Springfield. The Republican governor said, it's not true, don't do it. There's consequences for this. There's consequences. We could come together. Senator Langford did it. We could come together and solve this if we didn't let Donald Trump continue to make it an issue. And the consequences in Springfield were the governor had to send state law enforcement to escort kindergartners to school. I believe Senator Vance wants to solve this, but by standing with Donald Trump and not working together to find a solution, it becomes a talking point. And when it becomes a talking point like this, we dehumanize and villainize other human beings.
I love this answer. And you see in that answer also something that Walz does multiple times throughout the debate, which I thought was a weird tack. JD Vance has his tack, which was basically like, there was like making the case for Kamala Harris's policies, and also a little bit of weird mea culpa that we'll get into later. But Walz does something that I don't think he should have done, which is he tries to sort of like, almost win JD Vance over to our side, to the Democrat side, by sort of putting daylight in between JD Vance and Donald Trump. Like, I believe JD Vance doesn't believe these things, but Donald Trump does. It's like, bitch, he's the fucking running mate. What are you doing? Why would you give him this out? So that I thought was a massive missed opportunity, but I did like the language of humanization. If we are to ever solve the immigration crisis, if we have to humanize people, period, end of story. Before we leave Springfield, Vance has some fact checking to do. He's very mad, and he even cuts off the moderators because he wants to stand up for himself and his version of events in a state that he sort of represents.
Governor, and just to clarify for our viewers, Springfield, Ohio does have a large number of Haitian migrants who have legal status, temporary protected status.
Well, Margaret, but
thank you,
Senator. We have so much to get to.
Margaret, I think it's important
we're
because
going to turn out of the economy.
Debate, Margaret, the rules were that you guys weren't going to fact check, and since you're fact checking me, I think it's important to say what's actually going on. So there's an application called the CBP-1 app where you can go on as an illegal migrant, apply for asylum or apply for parole, and be granted legal status at the wave of a Kamala Harris open border wand. That is not a person coming in, applying for a green card and waiting for 10 years. That is the facilitation of illegal immigration, Margaret, by our own leadership.
Thank you, Senator, for describing the legal process. We have so much to get to, Senator.
Those laws have been on the books since 1990.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Okay, so Vance is trying to, once again, he repeated the line that Kamala Harris was the border czar, which she was not. Nobody pushed back on that, least of all Walz. But there he's like, basically, there's an application for your phone. It's CBP-1, and in it allows anybody to come in. No. And people who work on the immigration issue can tell you. And if you read anything about what CBP-1 has done to the asylum seeking process, to the legal migration process, it has utterly stalled it. It has made people, cause them to wait in Mexico, in Central American countries, but mostly Mexico, and wait for their turn to actually get an appointment to approach the border. There was a report, I think about a year ago, that I looked into for maybe this show that showed that border crossings were super down because of CBP-1, right? So the application has nothing to do with it. The app is sort of questionably legal if you're talking about asylum seekers who are fleeing violence right now, not fleeing violence when this application gives them permission to seek asylum. Do you understand what I'm saying? Anyway, so that was, so he really had to take a stand. It's like, are you kidding me, Vance? You're going to go off on this one issue? You straight up said a month ago that Haitians are eating cats and dogs. And the other thing about this was that, and we talked about this on the show, was that this was at the behest of Springfield residents who like having the immigrants. They've contributed to the economy. They do hard work. And they were like, we just need a few services like ESL services or, like job preparedness services. There are services that we would like to see. And JD Vance took that and ran. And as Talia Levin said on this show, basically created a pogrom against Haitian people in Springfield. Now there's neo-Nazis there. Cool. But anyway, that's enough of that. Some good lines that I think, beyond policy, here was just a good line from JD Vance finishing up the climate change part where he's able to call to memory and tell the American people that Donald Trump did host a bunch of oil executives at Mar-a-Lago and promised to kill the electric vehicle if they simply give him $1 billion.
And more of. But to call it a hoax and to take the oil company executives to Mar-a-Lago, say, give me money for my campaign and I'll let you do whatever you want. We can be smarter about that. And an all above energy policy is exactly what she's doing, creating those jobs right here.
Governor, your time is up. The overwhelming consensus among scientists is that the
So that was good. It wasn't amazing. It was like, he didn't say the $1 billion. He didn't call it what it is, which is bribery. But it was good. Now, speaking of lying, there was a moment where the CBS reporters felt like they were going to go after Tim Walz for lying. That's what they were going to do. And so they found a lie. They caught him in a lie about when he was in China, whether it was during the Tiananmen Square massacre or not. And so if you are comparing this at all to the kinds of things that that JD Vance has lied about consistently, I just don't understand why they had to do a whole segment on this, but I will share my thoughts about it because I actually think it's kind of based.
Governor, just to follow up on that.
Oh, hang on. Hang on. Let's go to the original. Let's go to the original thing. So basically, hang on. Okay.
You said you were in Hong Kong during the deadly Tiananmen Square protests in the spring of 1989. But Minnesota Public Radio and other media outlets are reporting that you actually didn't travel to Asia until August of that year.
I'm going to start that over just in case it's a little low.
You said you were in Hong Kong during the deadly Tiananmen Square protests in the spring of 1989. But Minnesota Public Radio and other media outlets are reporting that you actually didn't travel to Asia until August of that year. Can you explain that discrepancy?
Yeah, well, and to the folks out there who didn't get at the top of this.
Anyway, this is fucking ridiculous. Keep going.
Look, I grew up in small rural Nebraska, town of 400, town that you rode your bike with your buddies till the streetlights come on, and I'm proud of that service. I joined the National Guard at 17, worked on family farms, and then I used the GI Bill to become a teacher, passionate about it, a young teacher. My first year out, I got the opportunity in the summer of '89 to travel to China. 35 years ago, be able to do that. I came back home and then started a program to take young people there. We would take basketball teams, we would take baseball teams, we would take dancers, and we would go back and forth to China. The issue for that was to try and learn. Now, look, my community knows.
I said this during the debate, but I have to just reiterate it. I love this about Tim Walz. The fact that he is such, like, he is like the cookie cutter of a lib that like very much my mother like crafted in a lab of her making. My mother is Chinese. My mother loves like US China programs, exchange programs of understanding. She like is part of different efforts on that because she was raised in China and she is also an American, and she moved here when she was 10 years old. She moved to the United States and she loves this country, but she also has, not loyalty, but she loves China. She's Chinese and she believes that the way forward is through better understanding between our two countries. And I love that Tim Walz also believes in that, and that no, he's not on some xenophobic anti-China tip. And I wish like I like that he explains the program, which is really nice. But I do feel like he could, again, finish the thought. Like, this is what I mean about demonizing the other. This is what I mean when Donald Trump calls something the China virus. When anti-Asian hate crimes rise by exorbitant rates, we need to come together and understand one another and demystify one another. It only made me like him more. But yes, he misspoke, and here he goes.
Who I am. They saw where I was at. Look, I will be the first to tell you, I have poured my heart into my community. I've tried to do the best I can, but I've not been perfect. And I'm a knucklehead at times, but it's always been about that.
I'm a knucklehead.
Elected me to Congress for 12 years. And in Congress, I was one of the most bipartisan people, working on things like farm bills that we got done, working on veterans benefits. And then the people of Minnesota were able to elect me to governor twice. So look, my commitment has been from the beginning to make sure that I'm there for the people, to make sure that I get this right. I will say more than anything, many times I will talk a lot. I will get caught up in the rhetoric. But being there, the impact it made, the difference it made in my life, I learned a lot about China. I hear the critiques of this. I would make the case that Donald Trump should have come on one of those trips with us. I guarantee you he wouldn't be praising Xi Jinping about COVID. And I guarantee you he wouldn't start a trade war that he ends up losing. So this is about trying to
I love this. I just love this answer.
It's about trying to do the best you can for your community. And then it's putting yourself out there and letting your folks understand what it is. My commitment, whether it be through teaching, which I was good at, or whether it was being a good soldier or was being a good member of Congress, those are the things that I think are the values that people care about.
So this
Governor,
this is a
you
great
said you were in
answer,
Hong
but he's not answering what she wants him to answer, which is, what about lying? What about when you said you were there with the Tiananmen Square and the big. And it's like, no, but he's saying something far more interesting. But here was his full answer because there was pushback, right?
Governor, just to follow up on that, the question was, can you explain the discrepancy?
All I said on this is I got there that summer and misspoke on this. So I will just, that's what I've said. So I was in Hong Kong and China during the democracy protests went in. And from that, I learned a lot of what needed to be in governance.
Thank you, Governor. Senator Vance, in 2016,
Okay, here's what I love about Tim Walz. I critique him, but here's what I really love about him. That is a perfectly human, non-weird answer. Like, that was just like, yeah. And he was able to spin it rather than focusing on like how he might have misspoke. He just spun it and was like, and I learned a lot from the, democracy protests. Like, that was a thing I learned. And like, this exchange program is actually pretty tight and Donald Trump should go on it. Like, it was very human, and you felt that about Tim Walz throughout. My guy just said, alls I said. The most yokel ass down home people say alls I said. I love it. It's just very endearing. So it's funny that this gotcha for me and my little lib heart, like, felt like this only endeared me to him more. And as has been pointed out online, Jameson Foser online on Twitter says, JD Vance publicly admitted to lying about immigrants for political gain, and the only question to either candidate about their honesty was about whether Tim Walz got wrong the month he was in Hong Kong 35 years ago. Yeah. I mean, that's where we're at with this both sides bullshit. But again, like, it's red meat for the right. It's so the right will be like, they did a great job. Yeah. CBS did a really good job. No, this is amazing. I'm glad they didn't fact check in. But the questions did have a lot of fact checking laid into them. So, it was there. But I guess I just feel like this was a lot of weeds. There were a lot of weeds. Now, one of the weeds, I guess, was about, we're just going to do whatever. You guys are here. You're listening to the podcast. It's chill. We're hanging. Mass shootings and specifically gun violence in schools. And here was JD Vance's solution. It is to get better doors.
But what do we do about the schools? What do we do to protect our kids? And I think the answer is, and I say this not loving the answer, because I don't want my kids to go to school in a school that feels unsafe or where there are visible signs of security. But I unfortunately think that we have to increase security in our schools. We have to make the doors lock better. We have to make the doors stronger. We've got to make the windows stronger. And of course, we've got to increase school resource officers, because the idea that we can magically wave a wand and take guns out of the hands of bad guys, it just doesn't fit with recent experience. So we've got to make our schools safer. And I think we've got to have some common sense bipartisan solutions for how to do that.
It's amazing you can get away with this level of open weakness. Like, it's amazing to me. You can spend a year, obviously, lying about trying to get a ceasefire in Gaza. But it's also amazing to me that Republicans, for getting on their alpha male high horse every effing day when it comes to stopping school shootings, they have verbatim said, it's just a fact of life. It's a reality. There's nothing we can do about it. What do you want, a magic wand? I mean, what? I'm going to magically give back the money that the NRA gave me. I'm going to magically not accept any more gun lobby money. I'm going to magically put any kind of regulation on having weapons of war in the hands of children and just everyday people. I'm going to magically do that. Are you kidding me? That's insane. I would never, ever do that. Like, I am not a fairy godmother, and I do not have a magic wand. just so ridiculous. But that's what he was saying. And then this was the response by Tim Walz, which I thought was brilliant on this issue, especially in the ways that he talked about speaking with the victims of school violence. So here we go. Here is a little bit of this. Thank you, C-SPAN.
Tim, first of all, I didn't know that your 17-year-old witnessed a shooting. I'm sorry about that, and I hope that he's doing okay. So. Christ have mercy. It is awful, and I appreciate what.
So there's some point there where Tim Walz says that his son witnessed a shooting at a community center. So then, Christ have mercy.
What Tim said actually about Finland, because I do mental health. I don't think it's the whole reason why we have such a bad gun violence problem, but I do think it's a big piece of it. Another driver of the gun violence epidemic, especially that affecting our kids, it doesn't earn as many headlines, but is the terrible gun violence problem in a lot of our big cities. And this is why we have
anti-black coded.
To empower law enforcement to arrest the bad guys.
Ooh, arrest the bad guys. What color skin do the bad guys have?
I think there's a whole host
inner
of things
city
that we can do here, but I do think at our schools we've got to talk about more security.
Senator, thank you. Governor, you previously opposed an assault weapons ban, but it only later in your political career did you change your position. Why?
Yeah, I sat in that office with those Sandy Hook parents. I've become friends with school shooters. I've seen it. Look, the NRA,
He said, I become friends with school shooters, which is such a funny misspeak, but this answer is brilliant. I become friends with school shooters. I become friends with school shooters, the victims of school shooters.
The NRA guy for a long time. They used to teach gun safety. I'm of an age where my shotgun was in my car so I could pheasant hunt after football practice. That's not where we live today. And several things I want to mention on this is talking about cities and where it's at. The number one where the most firearm deaths happen in Minnesota are rural suicides. And we have an epidemic of children getting guns and shooting themselves.
That I thought was a brilliant line because nobody's talking about that. Right? Like that's just such, like you don't hear anyone talk about, number one, you don't hear about gun violence in the form of suicide very much. And you definitely don't hear about it in rural areas and maybe areas where like JD Vance grew up, or I mean, you know, Tim Walz also grew up in rural Nebraska. They're basically toe to toe on this down home shit.
And so we have, and we should look at all of the issues, making sure folks have health care and all that. But I want to be very careful. This idea of stigmatizing mental health, just because you have a mental health issue doesn't mean you're violent. And I think what we end up doing is we start looking for a scapegoat. Sometimes it just is the guns. It's just the guns. And there are things that you can do about it. But I do think that this is one, and I think this is a healthy conversation. I think there's a capacity to find solutions on this that work, protect Second Amendment, protect our children. That's our priority.
Gentlemen, thank you. Margaret?
So that I thought,
first of all, I didn't know that you're 17-year-old.
Sorry about that. That was great. That was excellent. Sometimes it's just the guns. I mean, he's saying it with a lot of like empathy and whatnot. Anyway, so I thought that was really, really good. I think it will reach a lot of people. It's much better than having thicker doors. Yeah. Thicker doors in Uvalde. So the Uvalde police can have one more reason to not go in and save elementary school children from a man with an AR-15. You fucks. Swear to God. Like, they expect us to forget, you know? They expect us to forget this shit. So let's talk about abortion. Here is JD Vance on the issue.
Have a big country and it's diverse, and California has a different viewpoint on this than Georgia. Georgia has a different viewpoint from Arizona, and the proper way to handle this, as messy as democracy sometimes is to let voters make these decisions, let the individual states make their abortion policy. And I think that's what makes the most sense in a very big, a very diverse, and let's be honest, sometimes a very, very messy and divided country.
Governor.
Yeah, let's let individual states, in fact, let's just let individuals make this decision about abortion. Just let's let individuals. Get rid of the states. Get rid of the voters. How about voter? Each individual voter for their each individual family. So that was his remark, which, by the way, followed JD Vance basically agreeing that they haven't done, and that the Republicans, I'm going to try to find this, that like Republicans have not done well on this issue. Very weird tack.
Now, of course, Donald Trump.
Hang on. Vance basically started off by saying, look, I agree. We have not done well on this issue. And we need to earn the trust of the American voters. And it's like, why? What? So you're basically admitting that you're shit on this?
Senator, let me ask you about that. He
Sure.
mentioned, it was, I think, referring to a national ban. In fact, you are making...
Hang on. I can't find it in time. It's all good, you guys. You know, it's just me right here. Our girl, Paige, had to go to sleep, but it's all good. So here was, let's listen to what Walz had to say on abortion. Oh, no, this is paid family leave. Dun, 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 dun. Hang on, here we go. I'm getting it somewhere. How are you guys? What's happening in your world? Okay, I have it here. Okay.
that you believe abortion, quote, in the 9th month is absolutely fine. Yes or no? Is that what you support? I'll give you 2 minutes.
That's not what the bill says, but look, this issue is what's on everyone's mind. Donald Trump put this all into motion. He brags about how great it was that he put the judges in and overturned Roe versus Wade, 52 years of personal autonomy. And then he tells us, oh, we send it to the states. It's a beautiful thing. Amanda Zaworski would disagree with you on it's a beautiful thing. A young bride in Texas waiting for their child at 18 weeks. She has a complication, a tear in the membrane. She needs to go in. The medical care at that point needs to be decided by the doctor. And that would have been an abortion. But in Texas, that would have put them in legal jeopardy. She went home, got sepsis, nearly dies, and now she may have difficulty having children. Or in Kentucky, Hadley Duvall, a 12-year-old child raped and impregnated by her stepfather. Those are horrific. Now, when God asked about that, Senator Vance said, 2 wrongs don't make a right. There is no right in this. So in Minnesota, what we did was restore Roe versus Wade. We made sure that we put women in charge of their health care. But look, this is not where, if you don't know Amanda or a Hadley, you soon will. Their Project 2025 is going to have a registry of pregnancies. It's going to make it more difficult, if not impossible, to get contraception and limit access, if not eliminate access to infertility treatments. For so many of you out there listening, me included, infertility treatments are why I have a child. That's nobody else's business, but those things are being proposed. And the catch-all on this is, well, the states will decide what's right for Texas might not be right for Washington. That's not how this works. This is basic human right. We have seen maternal mortality skyrocket in Texas, outpacing many other countries in the world. This is about healthcare. In Minnesota, we are ranked first in healthcare for a reason. We trust women, we trust doctors.
Crushed. I mean, this was crushed, top to bottom crushed. Remember the names of the women, talked about their cases, talked about especially the young, the 12-year-old who was raped by her father, which I think, again, it's like he's circling, he needs to go in for the kill. He needs to go in for the kill, which is under a second Donald Trump presidency, you are sentencing the victims of rape and incest to bearing the child of their abuser. Is that a world that cares for children, that cares for families, that cares about women? Is that a world that you want to live in? I sure as shit don't. And in fact, many women are currently living in that world. Like we're almost there at just like, go for the jugular, go for the jugular. But it was good. This, by the way, I mean, really the debate was effectively like it's like someone wanted to sell me a home in Minnesota. It was Minnesota up the ass, and it was good, and it felt good. like it was just all these things that Minnesota had implemented, you know, universal lunch programs, which actually Walz didn't even get a chance to mention, you know, but paid family and medical leave, you know, protecting Roe v. Wade, stipends and assistance for homeowners, like on and on and on and on. And it was like, damn, Minnesota kind of got it going on, right? Can we do that in the nation? That was the feeling that he gave, I think, in this debate. And what's interesting, again, Vance kept on coming back to Kamala Harris, but when it came to actual ideas he didn't have any. And he did not even articulate, again, his bonkers idea for childcare to basically just like let mom and dad, let grandparents do the child rearing. He kind of just agreed with what Tim Walz was laying out. And here's what Tim Walz laid out when it came to childcare and universal family leave and medical leave. And
you said
and this was, I think this is the clip. This was also a brilliant explanation for how social programs actually lead to economic benefits for all people. How when you help folks out in one particular way, they have, when they're not at risk of being evicted, when they're homeowners, their children can go to school, there's more stability, they stay in their jobs when they have paid family and medical leave. This was a very clear articulation of when you invest in people, it returns in dividends economically for communities, for your own personal family, to say nothing of for your mental health. I mean, I'm like, can someone put this whole thing into context for us? The reason, JD Vance at multiple times blamed mental health issues for gun violence, talked about how we're such a big country and there's a lot more mental health issues. Yeah, let's leave aside the fact that both of y'all are vets and veterans deal with massive amounts of PTSD, stigma, suicide rates, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The fact that people cannot make ends meet, the fact that people cannot afford homes, healthcare, food, car, that we are strapped with debt, that we are drowning over here. Don't you think that sort of contributes to the mental health crisis anyway? Doesn't that compound? Isn't surviving in such a backwards so-called first world nation adding to our mania? I'll just put that out there. Maybe that isn't the right move, but I would have tied it in.
Walz, you said that if Democrats win both the White House and Congress, this is a day one priority for you. How long should employers be required to pay workers while they are home taking care of their newborns? You have 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, that's negotiable, and that's what Congress worked. But here's what the deal is. Americans sitting out there right now, you may work for a big company. Look, we're home in Minnesota to some of the largest Fortune 500 companies. Kamala Harris knows that in California. Those companies provide paid family medical leave. One is, I think they're moral and they think it's a good thing, but it also keeps their employees healthy. We in Minnesota.
So I just love that. I love anyone injecting morality into a modern debate that isn't a right winger telling you that you need to sleep with a chastity belt or have your son look over your porn searches or your internet history. Like, I love when Democrats reclaim morality as part of why social programs are good. Companies, businesses do this. And this is the same reason the businesses have things like DEI programs, diversity broadly, gender equity, right? The woke things, because it is the moral, it is a good look PR-wise, and it's beneficial to your company. So it's just funny that Republicans are being so dishonest in this when JD Vance says that he thinks we do need better childcare. Yeah, we should. It is expensive. No, you don't. You don't agree with that. You don't agree with any of that. When Tim Walz touts how businesses offer paid family leave, that should sound to you like wokeism. That is an extension of woke. But it is the moral and yes, economically smart thing to do. Anyway, I'll continue.
Minnesota passed a paid family and medical leave. You have a child, you And I had to go back to work 5 days after my kids were born. This allows you to stay home a certain amount of time. What we know is that gets the child off to a better start. The family works better. We stay in their employers. We get more consistency in that. So Kamala Harris has made it a priority. We implemented it in Minnesota, and we see growth. That's how you become a pro-business state. But the negotiations on it, and here's the issue. Those big companies are able to offer it. Those of you out there who don't have it, just imagine what happens if you get cancer or your child gets sick. We know what happens. You end up staying home. In some cases, that means no paycheck because you've got no protection on that. This is the case of an economy that Donald Trump has set for the wealthiest amongst us. He's willing to give those tax breaks to the wealthiest. He's willing to say, bust those unions up, do whatever. What we're
I like
saying
that he
is
mentioned
the economy
unions.
works best when it works for all of us. And so a paid family medical leave program, and I will tell you, go to the families or go to the businesses and ask them. As far as childcare on this, you have to take it at both the supply and the demand side. You can't expect the most important people in our lives to take either our children or our parents to get paid the least amount of money. And we have to make it easier for folks to be able to get into that business and then to make sure that folks are able to pay for that. We were able to do it in Minnesota, and I'm still telling you this. We were listed as the best state. We're still in crisis on this. A federal program of paid family and medical leave and help with this will enhance our workforce, enhance our families, and make it easier to have the children that you want.
I love how he gestures. So if you're listening, he gestures to Vance, like, and make it easier to have the children that you want, like, I know you, psycho guy who wants to make sure that teens are giving birth to their rapist children. I mean, this is part of that weird vision of yours. Like, I love, like, I know you are trying to have as many kids as possible, and you like court this like weird proto-natalist movement. That was such a look. Bernie Sanders is a lot of things. Nuanced and hand-holding is not one of them. But that was the most like, this is like Tim Walz when he's the best is a very like buffered, like buffed out Bernie. He's very like soft focus Bernie. He's able to explain Bernie policies and how they help everybody, but in again, like a sort of down home, like neighborly, sweet, and simple way, right? Not using stats, not antagonizing the billionaire class either, which I have problems with because it's the same thing with not antagonizing oil companies when you're talking about climate change. At some point, you're going to have to antagonize them because they're going to fight you every fucking tooth and nail. And by the way, the other thing about this that I just wish like, like there's an extra little oomph for the independents out there, for the people who just want a little something, a little class war, like a little, not even, they wouldn't pitch it as class war, but just like talk about how when the Biden administration implemented price negotiations for Medicare, that the big pharma companies have been fighting you. They're taking you to court. That when you provided student debt relief to help people get ahead, you got taken to court because that's what you're willing to do to fight for the American people. Talk about how you know which side you're on by which people are fighting you. And if you make enemies of big pharma and finance, then that means you're doing the right thing. Americans eat that anti-establishment, anti-corporate shit up because we are sick of being waterboarded by fucking oligarchs. We're tired of it. So we need that Bernie energy. We like that Bernie energy. So this is the best. This is the best you get, other than Bernie, but it was good. I'm trying to think I think the final thing to talk about is probably when Walz became the most testy and the most not as glad handy, when it's like, all right, you're not gonna, thank you for not only being nice to JD Vance. And that is when talking about what happened on January 6th and the response. Here is, I don't know what point of the back and forth this is, but basically, JD Vance says, I'm focused on the future when asked by moderators about January 6th and whether, I don't think he was explicitly asked whether or not he would validate or he would accept the election results, which I think they should ask. But they asked him about January 6th and the trust in someone like Donald Trump.
Ability to say he is still saying he didn't lose the election. I would just ask that. Did he lose the 2020 election?
Tim, I'm focused on the future. Did Kamala Harris censor Americans from speaking their mind in the wake of the 2020 COVID situation?
That is a damning non-answer.
Has she?
The Tim Walz's face is just so like this is the still. To me, this is the still. I'm gonna get this photo right now because that shit is so good. I love this part. Like he is such a disappointed coach right now.
2020 COVID situation.
That is a damning non-answer.
It's a damning non-answer for you to not talk about censorship. Obviously, Donald Trump and I think that there were problems in 2020. We've talked about it. I'm happy to talk about it further.
Billy, just say.
Obviously, Donald Trump and I think there were problems in 2020. What do you mean? That's not what he was asking. He's saying, did you lose? Did they lose? Did they lose? And Vance was directly asked whether or not he's being checked on something he said, which is that he wouldn't have certified the election in 2020 like Mike Pence did. Here's a little bit more of that. I think it might be the same.
Billy, just say he is still saying he didn't lose the election.
The same thing. Okay, so that was just a highlight of the end there. And Walz then says, this is not an issue we can see eye to eye on. This is not, and you can't meet anyone halfway on this. This is absolutely about the peaceful transfer of power. This is about, whether we accept election results. This is about our democracy. I will say this. I could have used a little bit more of a fight in 2016 after the Democratic Party just rolled over to a Donald Trump presidency. I mean, I don't think you make it legal, like a legal fight, but I would have loved to see a passionate speech maybe the day after from, let's say, an Obama. That didn't happen. That dude went, kite surfing with Richard Branson. But I think the other thing about this is they start to, and I think some of the January 6th stuff, JD Vance claims, it was a protest. Oh, it was just a protest. It was a protest. Democrats protest all the time. I think we are also a little bit in dangerous territory when we condemn January 6th, which are, yes, January 6th, awful. We all know that. But condemn, let's just put it like this. If an election actually were stolen, and I think a lot of us agreed with this, if you were MAGA psycho crazy and you legitimately believed that the Democrats had stolen the election, you probably would have surrounded the Capitol building. It is not to demonize each and every single one of those people. It is what their leaders were telling them. It's the big lie. So as we prepare for November 6th, and today on the podcast, we talked to Ari Berman about all of the ways that Republicans are laying the groundwork to basically delay election results, cast doubt on election results, and change election results. If something like that truly happens, then you want to hope that Democratic leadership would not take that lying down the way we did in the year 2000. Say what you will about Republicans, they take to the streets when they think they've been wronged. Now, I think Democrats, I rephrase that, I think that progressives, leftists do that, but the Democratic establishment thinks that even protesting is so uncouth and out of order and out of pocket when it is the height of First Amendment rights, the height of free speech. So there's you know what I'm saying? There's a little bit of okay, well, you don't always have to accept election results like the way Al Gore did when the fucking Supreme Court straight up handed the election to George W. Bush. Oh, how our adult lives would have been very different, people. Oh, how our lives would have been different. And if you're young, oh, how your parents' life would have been different if the Democrats had just fought a little bit more. I mean, no do Capitol riot, but do a little bit of, a smaller riot. Anyway, you guys, thank you for being here and for listening and for watching. If you like the show, support it. It's a long day for me. Patreon.com/Bitchuation is where you go to do that. And before I sign off, I do want, oh yes, please become a patron. And in fact, during this stream, Madrid Poltney became a patron. Thank you so much, Madrid, getting this shout out. Appreciate you, Madrid. You get access to our bonus episode tomorrow, and I'm promising nothing but Moodang. Moodang, like nothing but Moodang, and maybe that penguin. What's that penguin? There's like a big ass penguin named like Pickles or some shit. And so we should definitely do that. But before I sign off, and I should have done this earlier, I did want to just plug that this show has a sponsor, and they are having a massive sale right now. SunsetLakeCBD.com is having a huge October edible sale. So with your coupon code October24 at checkout, you get 35% off all CBD edibles. So those sleep gummies that I always rave about, that have CBD, CBN, and melatonin, 35% off. It's a really good time to try it. And then you can use the Frantifa code for 20% off normally. So check that out. Again, they've got all kinds of great things, but I love their sleep gummies. And guys, try the Focus gummies. I'm telling you, they've knocked out headaches for me in the morning multiple times, and they relax you, but they make you focus. They've got relax gummies. They've got all kinds of things. SunsetLakeCBD.com, coupon code October24. Thank you, Sunset Lake, for sponsoring the show, and thank you all for being here. You are so wonderful. I will see all of you tomorrow, and thanks especially to the patrones. Have a good night.